How are you guys doing? Today is Tuesday, December 20th, 2022. I'm James Sims, and for this episode of The Elite, I am going to do an elite individual profile for Jorginho. The elite Italian center midfielder for Chelsea, a club in London, is turning 31 today. And of course, he has worked his way up to being not only one of the more important players for Chelsea in their run to being Champions League winners in 2021, he'll be one of the most important players for Italy's run to be the champions of Europe in that 2021 summer after Euros would get delayed. Standing in at 5'10", of course, Jorginho with the Eno, he has a little bit of sauce, a little bit of flair to his game. He has a really famous run-up penalty kick sequence in which he's able to really slot it in the net virtually every time he shoots. And not to mention that he's one of the better passers, one of the better all-around players. And at his very best, he would go on and finish third in Ballon d'Or in that 2021 season, in which he would help his country and club be champions of Europe. So, of course, looking into his past, he would start, he was born in Brazil, and he would eventually move to Italy, where he would end up playing for the Hellas Verona youth organization. He would finally get his call up and get actual playing time in his age 19 season in 2011-2012. In that season, he would start 26 of the 30 games he played for a Hellas Verona team that would finish second in the Serie B for the year. Regardless, within that season, he was able to add 2 goals and 3 assists, really kind of doing the best he really could to help out. Following that very first season, he would return for his second season with the team, as in his age 20 season, he would play his last season not at the very top division. As in Serie B, he would start 40 of the 41 matches he played for a Hellas Verona team that would finish second in Serie B and then eventually get promoted to Serie A. Jorginho would finish with 2 goals and 3 assists, and following that 2012-2013 season, he would be a part of the Hellas Verona team that would finally get called up to compete in Serie A. In his age 21 season in 2013-14, he would start all 18 of the games he played in the very first half of the season, scoring 7 goals and 3 assists in those games. He would score 5 penalty kick goals, as he was their designated penalty kick taker at 21. He would find himself getting moved to Napoli in the second half of that year, as once that particular season was over, he would be a part of a Napoli squad that would finish with the 3rd best record in the Serie A. Within that Serie A season, he would finish with maybe just 1 assist in the second half of that year, starting in the 12 of 15 games he played for Napoli, as his role did, of course, change a bit. In addition to finishing in 3rd place in the Serie A, they would go on and win the Coppa Italia actually in 2013-14. In the final, Napoli would beat Fiorentina 3-1, as Insigne would score a first half brace in that particular matchup. In the Champions League, they would get knocked out of group stage to the Europa League, as while competing in the Europa League round of 16, this Napoli side would eventually get bounced by Porto. Porto would lose in the quarterfinals to Sevilla. Sevilla would go all the way to the final, where they would beat Portuguese side Benfica off of penalty kicks. And this would lead into Jorginho's second season competing with Italy's Napoli, and this would be his very first season there, playing from beginning to end. In his age 22 season in 2014-15, he would start 14 of the 23 games he played in a season where Napoli would finish as the 5th best team in Italy. They would finish in the semifinals of the Coppa Italia, eventually losing in that particular round to Lazio, who would lose in the final to Juventus. This team, however, would go on and win the Italian Super Cup. They would end up beating Juventus 2-2, as it did happen to go to penalties, as Jorginho would take the first penalty kick for Napoli. He would miss it. However, Napoli would go on and win that trophy, as they would pick up 2 trophies in his very first 2 seasons there. Looking at how they would compete in terms of Europe, they would get knocked out of the group stage again. However, in the semifinal round of Europa League, they would eventually get knocked out, and this time they would get knocked out by the Ukrainian side, Dnipro Petrovsk, completely butchered the name, but Dnipro would end up losing to Sevilla in the final of this tournament 3-2. Following this tournament, this would lead into Jorginho's second full season with Napoli and his third year with the team. In his age 23 season in 2015-16, in a year which he would find himself getting promoted to the Italian national team, he would start 32 of the 35 games he played in a season where Napoli would finish runners-up in Serie A. This would be the best finish that they would have that year, as this was a season in which Juventus would go on and win the Serie A. But of course, in addition to finishing second in the entire league, Jorginho would finish with 4 assists within that year. That would be the most Serie A assists that he would put together in a full season, tied to the season where he moved from Hellas Verona to Napoli. In addition to that, this Napoli side would end up losing in the quarterfinals of the Italian Cup, as once they made it to the quarterfinals, they would get knocked out by Juventus, who would go on and win the entire thing. Outside of that, they would get knocked out this time in the round of 32 of Europa League. In this year, they would get knocked out in the round of 32 by a Villarreal side that would lose in the semifinals to Liverpool, and Liverpool would lose to Sevilla this time in the Europa League final. In 2016, like I said, he would get called up to play for the Italian national team. He would go on and go back to Napoli for his 4th season there, as in his age 24 season in 2016-17. He would start all 27 of the matchups he played in a season where Napoli would finish 3rd in the Serie A. 2016-17 was yet another season in which Juventus would go on and take the title. They would win it for their 33rd time. In the Serie A season, Jorginho would finish with 3 assists in those 27 games. The 2016-17 season would see Jorginho play 4 Champions League games in a season where Napoli would get bounced in the round of 16. The round of 16 would see Napoli get eliminated by Real Madrid, as Real Madrid would go all the way to the final to beat the Italian giants Juventus 4-1. Following that season, Jorginho would return to Napoli for his 5th and final season with the team. In his age 25 season in 2017-18, he would start all 33 of the matches he played in a season where Napoli would finish 2nd in Serie A. Outside of that, they would go on and get knocked out in the quarterfinal round of Coppa Italia, as in that round, the team that would end up beating him, Atalanta, would lose to Juventus in the semis, as Juventus would win the entire thing. Looking back at how Jorginho would fare in his last Serie A season, he would finish with 2 goals and 3 assists. Not to mention that also in that season, he will go on and play 4 Champions League games, adding a couple of goals in a path that would see Napoli get knocked out of the group stages of Champions League, and in the Europa League, they would lose in the round of 32. The team that would end up beating them this year would be RB Leipzig. Leipzig would lose in the quarterfinals to the French side Marseille. Marseille would go to the final, where they would lose to Atletico Madrid 3-0. This would lead into Jorginho eventually getting picked up by Chelsea, the team that he is currently playing for. He was signed on a 5-year contract, as in his very first season with Chelsea in his age 26 season in 2018-19. He would start all 37 of the games he played in a season where Chelsea would eventually finish 3rd in the Premier League. That season would see Chelsea pick up a Europa League title. However, first in the Premier League season, he would finish with 2 goals that year. He would finish with a penalty kick goal as well. In addition to that, this Chelsea side would end up losing in the fifth round of the FA Cup. In the English Football League final, they would end up losing to Manchester City on penalty kicks, as Jorginho was Chelsea's first penalty kick taker and would end up not converting that goal. And then in the Community Shield, which is the English Super Cup, he would end up losing 2-0, as Sergio Aguero would score a 2-goal brace for Manchester City to help them win. They would go all the way to the Europa League final, however, and beat Arsenal 4-1, as that would be the first continental trophy that Jorginho would pick up, as that game would see Eden Hazard score a brace to give Chelsea their lone trophy of the year. Following that 2018-19 season, Jorginho would return for a second season at Chelsea, as his age 27 season was the 2019-20 season. That would see the end of the season really kind of get pushed back, delayed, and it would result in the Champions League format getting altered a bit from 2 legs to just 1 leg for each round. In his second year with Chelsea in the Prem, he would start 27 of the 31 games he played for a Chelsea side that would finish 4th in the Premier League. To this date, Chelsea hasn't won the Premier League since 2017. In the 1920 season, Jorginho would finish with 4 goals and 2 assists. That would be the first time he had scored 4 goals in a domestic season since he was at Hellas Verona, to give you an idea of how long ago that was, back in 2013, on the bottom half of that calendar year. But taking a look at how he would fare outside of those particular games, he would find himself playing in the UEFA Super Cup in a year in which Chelsea would end up losing to Liverpool off of penalties. In this penalty kick shootout, Jorginho would actually make his penalty kick. However, it would be Tammy Abraham who would miss his, the only player of the 10 penalty kick shooters that would not convert it. In addition to that, this Chelsea side would also finish runners-up in the FA Cup final. This year, they would lose 2-1 to Arsenal, as Aubameyang would score a brace there. They would lose in the fourth round of the EFL Cup. And taking a look at how they would fare in the Champions League, this Chelsea team would get knocked out in the round of 16. They would lose to Bayern Munich, as Bayern Munich would play their lone 2-leg round in the round of 16, beating Chelsea 7-1, before they would go all the way to the final and beat PSG in Lisbon. Following this season, this would lead into Jorginho's 3rd season with Chelsea, which may go down as one of his best, if not his best, just outright. In his age 28 season in 2020-2021, he would start 23 of the 28 matches he played for a Chelsea side that would finish 4th in the Premier League for the 2nd year in a row. That year, he would finish with 7 goals and an assist in the Prem, as all 7 of his goals would be penalty kick goals that year. Outside of the Premier League, Jorginho would help Chelsea go all the way to the final of the FA Cup, where they would lose 1-0 to Leicester City off of Yuri Tielemans' screamer of a goal. Additionally, that year they would lose in the 4th round of the EFL Cup. In Champions League, while competing for Champions of Europe, they would go on and win their 2nd Champions League title this century, as in the 2021 Champions League final, they would beat Manchester City 1-0. The lone goal of that game would eventually come off of the foot of Kai Havertz, as once they would get that trophy, they would be the champions of Europe in that regard, as they had won Europa League just 2 years prior. Once they would get to the summer, Jorginho would compete with Italy in the 2020 Euros that would get moved back a year because of COVID. In the Euros, Italy would end up beating Turkey, Switzerland, and Wales to make it through the group stage. In the knockout stages, Italy would end up beating Austria in the very first matchup in extra time. In the quarterfinals, this Italian team would beat Belgium 2-1. In the semis, Italy would beat Spain off of penalties, as in the shootout, Jorginho would make Italy's last penalty kick attempt to send them to the final. And then Italy would end up beating England in the final off of penalty kicks. Jorginho would end up missing his. However, Saka would miss his for England, and that would result in Italy going away and taking home their 2020 Euros title, the 2nd in their nation's history. The only other time that they had won it was in 1968, which should give you an idea of how historic this win was. All while helping Chelsea win Champions League and helping Italy win the Euros. Jorginho would finish in the top 3 of Ballon d'Or voting in 2021, in addition to making the FIFA Pro 11 team for the very only time of his career so far. Once that Champions League season with Chelsea was finished, however, it would lead into his 4th season with the team, as in his age 29 season, this past season in 2021-2022, he would start 26 of the 29 games he played in a season where Chelsea would finish 3rd in the Premier League. This would be the best finish they had had in the last couple of years, as in that Premier League season, Jorginho would finish with 6 goals and a couple of assists. This would be the 2nd year in a row he had at least 5 or at least 6 penalty kick goals scored that year. Alongside his 6 goals and 2 assists in the Prem, Jorginho would go on and add 2 goals and 2 assists in a Champions League run that would see Chelsea get knocked out of the quarterfinal. This year, that Chelsea team would end up losing to Real Madrid, who would go on to the final after beating Chelsea, Man City, and Liverpool to win it, and then PSG in the round of 16 in one of the wildest paths to the championship ever. However, outside of the Champions League and the Prem, prior to the beginning of the year following the Champions League win, Chelsea would go on and win the Super Cup, beating Spanish side Villarreal 1-0 in a penalty kick shootout, as Jorginho would make his penalty kick in this shootout. In the Club World Cup, Chelsea would go on and beat the Brazilian side Palmeiras 2-1 in the final in extra time. So that would lead also into them finishing as runners-up in the FA Cup and the EFL Cup, both to Liverpool. In the FA Cup final, they would lose off of penalties as it was 0-0. Jorginho would make his penalty kick in this game. In the EFL Cup final, it would be 0-0 again, as this would go to 11 penalties as Jorginho would make his penalty again, as it would be Arrizabalaga or Kepa, Chelsea's goalie, who would end up not converting, which would give Liverpool the cup. However, this would lead us to this particular season right now. Right now, he is in his 5th season with Chelsea, in his age 30 year with Chelsea, as he turned 31 today. So far this season, Jorginho has started 11 of the 13 matches he's played for a Chelsea side that is holding the 8th best record in the Prem at the World Cup break. As of right now, they are sitting 16 points out from first place, and they sit 5 points out from 5th place in terms of possibly earning a Europa League spot. But of course, that is where we're standing. Currently in the Premier League, Jorginho is holding on to 2 goals this season, as they're both penalty kick goals. In the Champions League, he is competing with a Chelsea side that is getting ready to face off against Borussia Dortmund, the German club, in the round of 16, starting on February 15th. But of course, that brings us to where we are right now, as his Italian side would not qualify for the FIFA World Cup this year. But I can't wait to see what he does in his age 30 year, as he did sign a 5-year deal for Chelsea. I don't think that Chelsea imagined that he would be this important and this potent, but at this point, he's definitely running with this momentum. He is one of their more important players, and it'll be interesting to see what he does with this Chelsea season, as now they are dealing with a new coach and they are facing an opponent that they need to definitely prepare for moving in. With that said, I want to thank everyone for listening. I hope all is well, and I'll catch you with another episode following this. Thanks for listening. Peace out.